Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's interview. I have my friend Shane with me today, and I was introduced to her through a mutual friend, and she has such an interesting story to share with you. She is an author, a coach, and a speaker, and has not only survived, but has learned how to thrive through multiple childhood traumas and even traumas in her adult life. And I can't wait for you to hear her. She is just so precious to spend time with, and she'll just make you smile, make you feel better. I'm going to just bring her in here so you can meet her. Hello, Shane. One thing I forgot to ask you at the beginning, so I didn't say it when I was introducing you, is how do you pronounce your last name?
Svorec. So it's almost
Svorec.
like there's an A after the S, Svorec. Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't say it because I would have mispronounced it. And I forgot to say who I am. For those who are new, I'm Danielle Bernack from DanielleBernack.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. With Shane Svorec. And I told them that you just have such an interesting growing up. You have so many different things that have happened to you throughout your entire life. And so to start with, why don't you share a little bit about your early childhood when you were really small?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. I will say that my early childhood was pretty unconventional. It started out almost as though, it seemed pretty normal. My father was in the military. My mother and he were young love, and a product of young love, got married. My mother followed him over to Germany, where I was born on an army base.
Wow.
And life was pretty good until she discovered that he was not being faithful, and he was not coming home, and so she was
Wow.
at that point, pregnant a second time with my younger brother, and life was hard for her, living on an army base, and had a young one, and then was pregnant again, and found out overseas that her husband was not being faithful, and she happened to catch him in the act, which was even more painful.
Oh,
So
yeah.
and
Ouch.
it was, and there's a lot of details in the book, without going into too much detail, but you can certainly read between the lines,
Yeah.
what was going on. And it was a very painful experience for my mom. So I know that she herself has carried around a lot of pain. We came back to the, to the States, and we started life again. And it was just the three of us. So we kind of became this very strong unit. We depended on one another, and it was just always my mom, myself, and my brother. And it was later in life. I was about 6 years old, and she met someone. She was going to school to be a hairdresser, and she met someone, and they were going to get married. He was a couple of years younger than her. They were excited and in love, and finally things were shaping up and looking really positive for my mom. And I hadn't seen her that happy in a very long time.
Wow.
So we were very excited. They went off on their honeymoon, and they came home earlier than expected, and she had bruises all over her body. And at that age, I was intuitive enough and curious enough, and felt there was something wrong, and thought initially that maybe he had been hitting her.
Oh, wow.
And she sat me down and said, I need you to be strong, and I need you to be a big girl. And she told me that on her honeymoon, she wasn't feeling well, and she went to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with leukemia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
not a very good honeymoon present.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
And you were 6 then?
Yeah, I was 6. So and life pretty much changed after that, rightfully so. And you could imagine things were very uncertain. And this new exciting celebration of marriage was, had this black cloud hanging over it. And from the very beginning, she wasn't really expected to live. She had gone into the city and they did all that they could for her. And at that time, they said, there's nothing more we can do. And it was just a matter of time. She had the most aggressive type of leukemia, AML. And at that time, there really was not any hope for her whatsoever.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, she had heard about a hospital out in Seattle that was doing research. And
And where did you live?
we lived in New York. And
Okay.
and she had heard about this hospital. It was actually through my stepfather. Someone in his family had heard about it. And at that point, they decided they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And so they made plans and accommodations for my brother and I to live with family. And they went out to Seattle to try their best to save her life. She was one of the first in our country to ever receive a bone marrow transplant that successfully took. So they actually have a yearbook of leukemia patients at this particular hospital, and she's page 3 of successful transplants. So she was just a guinea pig, and she was grateful that it worked.
Wow.
So
Well, you had said that you lived with your dad when she was away from you for a year. Were you with your first dad or your stepdad, or what dad?
yeah, my stepfather was always with my mother. My stepfather was always by her side and with her. It's a very complicated story, as you can tell, but we spent time we were first staying with my relatives, my mother's sister, and my mother, my maternal grandmother, I should say my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, thought that it would be best, considering my mother's imminent supposed outcome, that
Mhm.
my real biological father should be aware that her outcome was grim. My grandmother, meaning well, reached out to him to let him know that she was not
How your
doing
mom was
well.
doing, yeah.
And so I think she thought that she was doing what was best for us. And he tried to come and get us. And my mother, at all costs, wanted to avoid that because she didn't want us to have that influence, and she didn't think that it was healthy for us. And her being in a hospital bed, did everything she could, by way of phone calls and reaching out, trying to kind of keep us away from him.
Oh, wow.
So that resulted in middle of the night Greyhound bus trips, and being put on the bus with my brother, and being told to watch him and don't get off until you're told. And they made arrangements with the bus driver, and so we went off in the middle of the night and went to my stepfather. Now imagine, it's only been a couple of months that he's been our stepfather, but we were en route to South Jersey, where my stepfather's parents lived. And we got off the bus and they welcomed us, and we and there we were. They enrolled us in school, and they were very nice people. But we got off the school bus one day, and there were cop cars and lights shining, and it
Wow.
and
And
it
how old were you when that happened?
so about 7.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Almost 7, because I was 6 when she was diagnosed, and so I was just turning 7. And yeah, and so the police were there, and I knew from pictures what he looked like, but I had never had a relationship with my father. He never kept in touch with us, so I
Yeah,
just
you had said you
surmised.
were like 3 when they got divorced, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's pretty
yeah.
little.
So yeah, so I just I do recall, and I saw pictures,
Mhm.
um but I saw a figure, with the red and the blue sirens going and the lights shining. I saw a figure, and I immediately knew that it was him. And so he had driven from Nebraska to come and get us. He had reached out to the state and said, my ex-wife is ill and not expected to live, and these are my children. And he decided that I think it was a little bit of no other man is going to,
Yeah.
be in their life. And so he had temporary custody to take us, and we hopped in a pickup truck and drove out to this little town in Nebraska.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been really traumatic for everybody. I mean, you go to school and then you don't come home. I mean, your step grandparents were probably like, what the heck just happened?
Yes.
Where'd they go? And oh my
Yes.
goodness, the fallout from that, the emotional fallout everywhere. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you with him? And what happened after that? You told me this really good news about your mom. So
Yeah. It was, we were there for almost a year. And there were many times, I think he resented the fact that I had a lot of love and respect and admiration for my mother. And I was very close with my mom. So I resented the fact that he took us away. Even though we weren't with her, she made sure that we were in a place that she felt we were safe. And so I resented the fact that he came in and swooped in and kind of took us away. And we had no choice or no say in the matter. So
right, you were too little.
Right. So we were there for about a year. And he worked nights on the railroad. My brother was just in kindergarten. He was just going to kindergarten. And I remember I've been a little adult for a very long time. So even as a child, I've kind of been a caretaker.
Oh yeah,
and
your mom sat you down and said, you need to be a big girl when you're 6. No
Right.
6-year-old needs to be a big girl.
Right. And so I always took care of my brother and, made sure that he ate and that we got to school together. And so it was a very unique experience, and he wasn't there a lot. And when he was, I just remember, ashtrays with cigarette butts overflowing and,
Wow.
it was just not that I don't judge anyone who smokes, but it was the whole, just the environment, the ashtrays full of butts that were never cleaned out. The toilet tank on the top, had Playboy magazine stacked, all the way to the top. He was very, very interested in himself and his needs and his wants and desires. And I don't think he ever learned how to be a father. So I think he wanted what he wanted in the moment, which was, to come and get his kids. But I don't think that he ever realized what that entailed. So, he was ill-equipped to be a father. And so I was kind of being the mom and the dad. And he once, during Christmas time, I wanted to send my mom a Christmas present at the hospital. And I didn't have any money. I was just a little girl. But I had found 2 sticks that were relatively flat. And I had this great idea that I was going to nail them together and make a cross. And I gave it to him and I said, can you please mail it to her? And he said, yeah, I'll mail it to her. Well, it was years later. And I happened to ask my mom, so whatever happened to that cross that I sent you? And she said, I never got one. So he never mailed it. He resented that I had this love and affection for her and I wasn't, I didn't have the same for him. But I've always been of the mindset, and I think for children, you have to show love and you have to earn love and you have to, you can't just, I'm your dad and just wait for this embrace.
Job to take care of the child.
Right.
It's
So
the parent's job to love the child, no matter what the child does. That's the parent's job.
Yeah. So I was a little, in that respect, I wasn't easily won over. My brother was young, he was just a little kid. And on the way out to Nebraska, I remember having to go to the bathroom in the worst way and didn't even want to talk to him. And I just sat there hoping that eventually we would stop so that I could go to the bathroom, because I didn't even want to ask him, and he bought my brother a couple of Matchbox cars. And of course, everything was fine, because he's little and he didn't know any better.
Right.
But
was he like 4?
Yeah, because then when we got out there, he started kindergarten. So just at 5. So he was 4 when all of this was happening. By the time we got out there, it was time to enroll us in school. So
Wow. And your mom recovered because she got that bone marrow transplant. And then you told me about after that, you had adventures after that. What were your adventures after she recovered?
yeah, well, we were, I will never forget the day we were in this house of his, and my brother came running in the back door, and, he said, Shaney, mommy's here, mommy's here. And I
Wow.
looked
She
at
just
him.
showed up?
Yeah. And I said, his name. And I said, that's not nice. I said, you can't make up stories like that. You can't, that's not nice. It's not funny. And I was upset with him for saying that, because I used to sit in a little church out there, and I would pray over and over and over again for a miracle, and would pray that she would be cured. And so, yeah, he said, no, mommy's here, mommy's here, mommy's here. And so I came out of my bedroom and I followed him, half angry with him for lying, so I thought, and half, intrigued, like, what is he
Oh,
saying, and why is he
he's so
saying it?
bent on that. What is this? Why
Right.
is he doing this? Yeah.
Yes. So I went out the back door, and there was the driveway was a dirt driveway, and I came around the side, the back side of the house, and I saw her standing there, skinny, bald, pale white, but alive. And she
Yeah.
was standing there with my stepfather. And yeah, we raced to her.
Oh,
And
wow. I
and
can just
she
envision that. Mommy.
yes, yes. And he was working on a pickup truck in the driveway at the time. And after we hugged and cried some more, she asked him if they could take us out for dinner. And he was like, yeah. So we went out for dinner, and we sat, and I mean, I remember her just staring at me and staring at my brother. And she kept saying, oh my gosh, like, your hair got so long, to my brother, you need a haircut. And was looking at me and saying, oh my gosh, you're like a little woman. And, she for a mother to look at her children after, a year and a half, going on 2 years, not to see your kids, and to walk in, and
Wow.
it was an experience for her. And we
Yeah.
just stared at her, and the bald head, and looking at her, and saying, so you're okay. And she said, yeah, it worked. She had a near death experience too that was unbelievable and beautiful all at the same time, in which she shared with me. But that night at the restaurant, she wanted to do the right thing and said, I have to take you back, and I have to go back to New York, and I have to go before the judge, and I'll come back and pick you up. And we cried and said, no, you can't
Don't
leave
leave
us.
us
Don't
here.
leave us. And it only took that. And she said, oh, forget it. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it the right way, if that's what it takes. And so we left from the restaurant, and we were in a powder blue Volkswagen bus, and we really didn't have a clear destination. We just knew that we were free,
Your
and that
mom and your
we were,
stepdad and you and your brother?
yep.
Wow.
And so that was, the bus that I called freedom, and it was fueled by hope. And so we were on the road, and we made our way back to New York, and we were not in New York for very long. I don't know if it was that my mom decided that there was really nothing there for her, or if she thought, what, like, life is short, and we're going to just go and find where we belong. But that's what we did. We got back to New York, and then we got back in the bus, and we traveled all over the country.
Oh, wow.
My stepfather was a construction worker. So we would stop, he'd pick up an odd job or two. Sometimes we'd stay a couple days, sometimes we'd stay a couple weeks. And we'd fill up the gas tank, and then we'd go on to the next destination. So we
Wow.
had lived in a lot of places, gone to a lot of schools. Part of it was summer, so we weren't missing much. But then when school was in session, we were being enrolled in new schools. So I became very good. I was already comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that was part of my life, not having a very consistent and strong foundation. I became very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I started to learn how to almost self-soothe and self, to have the self-awareness and to look at the world and watch, people go by and to be immersed into different places and different situations, that I kind of just became a natural observer and learned very early on how to sort through my own emotions and my own reactions and try to, put my finger on things to understand things, because there were a lot of things that I
How did you do
couldn't.
that? You had mentioned before we came on here about Mr. Rogers. Was that any part of that?
Yeah. So Mr. Rogers, I'm sure there are a lot of people, and I'm sure there's a lot of a certain generation that loved Mr. Rogers and probably felt the same way that I did. And that was when I sat on the carpet, and I mean, like, just the shag carpet that was orange and green, and like that whole vision, and sitting in front of the boob tube. And I'm not even that old. I think my grandparents called it the boob tube, but you would sit on the carpet and you'd have to change the channel by yourself. There were no remotes. And I remember Mr. Rogers coming on the screen, and he was talking just to me. He was talking to everybody else, but he was talking just to me. And I thought he was my best friend because he understood me, and he understood that, the things that I was going through, and gave me permission to experience the emotions that I was feeling, or to be afraid, or to be, worried, or to wonder about things. So
That's awesome that you had that. It sounds like that's where you got your emotional intelligence from growing up. I never watched Mr. Rogers as a kid. I'd never seen it before. All
yeah.
my knowledge of it is because since the movie, saw the movie, it's like, now I'm intrigued. Who is this guy and what did he do?
Yes.
But him dealing with the emotions, because you being able to deal with that many emotions as a child, and you're like, well, I just learned this and I just learned this. Like, that's not a natural thing that a child does. And it just seems like that may have been the seed. How old were you when you were watching Mr. Rogers? Was it for a long time? Was it just for a short time? Was it when you were on the road, when you were little? How much of your life was he a part of that?
It was a long time. For as long as he was on the air, I tuned in. So throughout my entire childhood, I watched him. But I have to say, I come from a very long line of strong women. My grandmother, who I love, she has since passed, but my grandmother and I were very close. Coincidentally, my grandmother and I share the same birthday. And it wasn't until years later that I found out that we also share the same birthday as Mr. Rogers. And I thought, well, this is
That's
kind of
crazy.
strange.
What's your birthday?
Right, March 20th. So I always felt this, and that wasn't until I was an adult that I found out that was,
It's
cool,
cool
that
to
was
find
his
out
birthday.
stuff like that.
Yeah. But my grandmother was always very very strong and independent, spoke her mind, but did so with tact. And she was always very honest with me. And my mother was this, she was always the same growing up. Although, I do at times question the judgment that was used in certain, throughout certain experiences in my life. Because now, me as a mother myself, I wonder, why she thought something was okay when I wouldn't. But I think we all learn from these experiences. And I know that as a mother, I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes, and she made mistakes, and we all do the best with what we have.
Mhm.
But I think between my grandmother and my mother being very strong, I think it's a blessing and a curse that strong people, dig down deep and tend to rely a lot on themselves instead of asking for help. And I think it's a tough balancing act. And so I guess because I spent so much time, so between the strong women in my life, between the loving, encouraging, Mr. Rogers just had a way about him, and the way he spoke to people, and the way he would look you right in the eyes through this television screen and let you know that, he's there and he understands and he hears you, that it resonated with me. And I thought, oh my gosh, he does, he hears me. So, I went through life, always being very empathetic myself. And so I think for that reason, I connected even more with him, because it felt like, wow, he even feels things like I do. So so to answer your question, I mean, no, you don't just learn these things, but I think that sometimes when you don't have a choice, when there's no alternative, when it's sink or swim, even at a young age, I had some models of strength. I had almost a resistance to giving up. I was gonna experience it, and I was gonna feel the emotions, and I was gonna have the pain, but I resisted giving up because I didn't, who would I fall back on if I did? I was alone. I couldn't, my mom was in the hospital, or, there were just so many other things, and maybe other problems and other challenges that we had to overcome, that I thought, I don't know. Maybe, focusing on others too was also a benefit.
Awesome. Well, you kind of covered that, asking the question of, how you took ownership of your life through your perspective, is like through you had family, you had some family, even though you had all kinds of chaos in your life and you lost lots of friends, and even how you went through breast cancer and emerged out of that, healed yourself, that with children who grow up with childhood emotional neglect, they don't get what they need emotionally. And so they have no tools at all. But it seems like you had enough. One of the things that Dr. Janice Webb says, that what makes it neglect is that the child doesn't get what they need. It's like they have a certain line that's enough. And each child is different. And it sounds like you got enough from your mom and your grandmother and Mr. Rogers, that you were able to have that resilience and that stick-to-itiveness and that strength. And you mentioned church in there somewhere also, and you were praying. So you have some sort of connection to that as well, right?
Yes. And I think that throughout my life, I've always believed in something more. And I think, it's similar to that excitement that you have, like we all have bad days, and there's days when things just don't go right, but you have something to look forward to. You are going to a wedding tomorrow. Maybe it's one of your children who are getting married, and you have something to look forward to. And I think from a very young age, I don't want to say tricked myself, but I conditioned myself to remove myself a bit from the situation, from the circumstances, from the immediate present moment, and forced myself to look forward to something, to look forward to a better day, a solution that was going to fix what was happening, a friend that I might meet, someone that I might help because of what I'm going through. So I continually practiced and tried to believe in something better and look forward to something. And my faith has sustained me. If I didn't have my faith, I don't know where I would be, because, from a very young age, I read a verse in the Bible, and there was an adaptation of that verse because it was a student Bible. And it said that, our Heavenly Father is better than any human father could ever be, and understands us more than any human father ever could. And that was so reassuring to me, because I felt I may not, which I came to peace with. I never carried this heartache over not having my father in my life. I knew that I was better off. I knew that I was much more mature. I knew that I had chosen my path. And so I didn't, I wasn't one of those girls who, I allowed a bad relationship because of my father to dictate the rest of my life. And instead I chose to be proud that my Father in heaven chose me, and my Father in heaven is protecting me, and my Father in heaven is guiding me and is by my side. And if
That's
anything,
amazing.
yeah.
That's
So
amazing. The translation that you read, for it to put it side by side like that, because so many people struggle with their view of God as a father because they view it through the picture of their earthly father. But
right.
with that translation that you read, it separated that comparison for you, which
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, I am just amazed at the little breadcrumbs you've had in your life to be able to gather them all together and just develop that hope and that strength and all of that. That is just really profound. Well, you have a book, right? Why don't you
I
show us your
do.
book? Tell us
I
just a
do.
little bit about your book and then how people can connect with you.
All right. So Broken Little Believer. I love the title. It took me a long time. I have pages and pages and pages of titles, but Broken Little Believer really summarized what I feel the book conveys and what I really wanted to convey to those who were considering reading it. And one, broken is not necessarily bad. Sometimes we have to break so that we can put those pieces back together where they belong. Or sometimes we have to break to let the light out. Sometimes we have to break so that those broken pieces connect with other broken pieces and help others. So we're all broken in some way, whether it's a bad relationship, whether it's, a home life that wasn't good, childhood trauma, illness, loss, whatever it may be, we're all broken in some way. But believing changes everything. And if you can be broken, but if you believe in a better day, if you believe in possibilities, if you choose to be an example rather than an excuse, this is really, it is mirrored on, it follows my story, my journey, but it invites readers into that VW bus where you get this glimpse of the little girl and the things that she's seen, the things that she's overcome. And you start to look at people differently because you realize that you can't judge someone, in just on face value. You don't know the path that they've traveled. You don't know where they've come from or the things that they've overcome. So with each chapter, there are reflection points and there are places just like the journey where you check your baggage. And it gives readers an opportunity to reflect on the story, but also comparing it to their own life. And what baggage are you still carrying? What baggage are you holding on? Because it just, it brings back memories. But are they good memories? Are they helpful memories? Are they benefiting you in your future, in your life? And sometimes it's pain or there's good baggage and bad baggage. So it's an opportunity for readers to kind of look at their own life and decide, if they're living their life and finding their purpose, or if they're leaning on excuses and leaning on the past and not capitalizing on what they've been given and maximize that. So
That's awesome. So how can people
thank you.
connect with you?
So they can connect with me on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and also on my website. So it's brokenlittlebeliever.com, and you can follow me on all social media handles, Broken Little Believer.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
yes, thank you for having me.
And I will talk to you in just a couple of minutes, okay?
Okay.
Oh, I did that wrong. I did it again. I did it once to someone else who I was interviewing because I don't use my mouse when I'm doing this live because my laptop only has two little plugins and I use a special little microphone for this. And I hit the wrong button. But we make mistakes. We were just talking about that. Shane and I were just talking about that just a minute ago. We make mistakes in our lives. We all make mistakes. We have brokenness in our lives. And I know that you enjoyed that time with Shane. And if you are interested, pick up a copy of her book, Broken Little Believer. Connect with her on Facebook, Instagram, all the different socials. And Thank you for being with us today. I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Until next time,